Going back to the idea of a spectrum, here's all our sort of types of assets which are above a threshold of being designated. And then you've got all of those things above that lower level of threshold, which could be considered on a local heritage list. So you can have a park and garden, which could be a man-made area of green space for enjoyment. So it could be a deer park, or it could be an urban park, or it could be a garden associated with a country house, for example. And you technically have sort of equivalent sort of areas of historic and architectural value, like a conservation area. We can have buildings, and buildings is a bit of a misnomer because building doesn't really mean building. It means a fixed man-made structure. So you could have a petrol pump, a telephone box, some graffiti on a building. They're all count as buildings, even though we think of a building as having a roof. It's not strictly the case. We can also have archaeology, whether that's, you know, ruined buildings or a site that we know is below ground, perhaps like a barrow. And technically, although we're not doing it as part of this project, we can have wreck sites, which, you know, it's sort of fascinating when you start trying to think about recording some of these things, especially when you have things in estuaries and harbours where you might have really historic ships and boats, which are perhaps forgotten about because of their history and rediscovered. So hugely interesting, that one. And like I said, it's about being above that lower level of significance. So you can have things on the local heritage list, which are perhaps archaeology, which are, you know, a higher level of significance for a scheduled monument, but they're just not scheduled. So that's really, really important. Don't think if something's just really, really important, you can't put it on if it's not already listed. So to summarise, it's about capturing and recording heritage assets which have local importance and merit consideration in the planning process. It's about the built environment and man-made assets. And you can have a variety of different things from parks and gardens, areas, buildings, archaeology and shipwrecks. And it might not be the most obvious thing, like this wreck post, which is, you know, massively connected to maritime heritage of Cornwall, risks involved and the Coast Guard, but to the casual observer might at first glance be a sort of telegraph pole in the field. We're doing it via this web app, so I'll go through this in a bit more detail later, but it's essentially logging on, finding where it is and putting it forward as a proposal. And then it goes through a process where it's reviewed against selection criteria before, if it's actually agreed as an asset, then it's actually published on a website. And hopefully this is just a snapshot of Polkeris off our historic environment website. You know, the information on this website will be so much more enriched by the process. There'll be so much more on there for people to research and also use as part of, you know, looking at planning applications. So really, really worthwhile project from that point of view. I think one of the questions that's probably going to be all on your minds is, you know, essentially, what's it for? You know, is it just about planning? Is it just about understanding the historic environment? And essentially, it's about both, really. It's about encouraging people in Cornwall to have a say about what they feel is important. And it's about being able to make better decisions about managing heritage, whether that's looking at conservation area appraisals or planning applications. Also, it really increases interest in the historic environment. And that's one of the key things. This is sort of this idea of a virtuous circle where if people are really, really engaged with the historic environment, they'll want to value it and they'll want to care for it. So, you know, from our point of view, we love historic buildings, we love archaeology, and we'd love to share that with as many people as possible. And a key thing as well is planning decisions. You know, will this have an impact? You know, if someone's wanting to build something in a village or a town and we know more about the historic environment there, does it help with the planning decision? And the key answer to that is yes, it does, but only up to a point. So it doesn't change what requires permission. So if someone wants to change their windows in a house, it's still permitted development rights, even if it's locally listed. So that's a key one to remember. and it's not the same weight in planning decisions as it might be for, say, a listed building. It's a balanced judgment. So it's a straight sort of like for like decision rather than thinking, well, actually it's a listed building, so there's a presumption in favour of conservation. Also, it doesn't mean that an asset needs permission for demolition unless, say, for example, it's in a conservation area where if it's over a certain size, it might. So yes, it does mean that things have greater protection, but only up to a point. And I think that's really, really important to take on board.